Simon Richardson is one of around 440,000 people globally who each year contract TB, which is resistant to drugs, making it much harder to treat.
Found out I had TB, which was bad enough. When they said I had resistant TB, it was just hard to pick myself back up again. But yeah, the side effects were awful. Like, I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy.
Antibiotics were first made available in the 1930s, but it wasn't until a decade later that the mass production of penicillin began. Now, globally, we take millions of antibiotics every year, but we're becoming increasingly resistant to them. And resistance makes it harder to treat people with bacterial infections. Sometimes the more antibiotics a patient takes, the more resistant they become to the drugs that are supposed to help them. Organisms such as bacteria, viruses and some parasites can then withstand an attack from standard treatments such as antibiotics and antivirals. Resistance happens because the organism can then mutate its genes and survive. The World Health Organization believes resistance to antibiotics poses a global health threat with consequences far beyond the health sector. England's chief medical officer says the danger poses as big a risk as terrorism.
I recently had a minor operation on my wrist, got no infection and was fine. But in 20 years' time, if I had that operation or a replacement hip and I got an infection, it might well not be treatable. If it gets into my blood, I could die. We could be back where we were at the beginning of the 19th century, with untreatable infections and a high death rate.
And since the late 80s, some scientists say no totally new antibiotics have been developed as pharmaceutical firms focus their attention elsewhere.
It's not terribly good business because antibiotics work so well, they cure patients in a week, 2 weeks, so you're not taking them for your whole life. So, from a strictly business point of view, they're not very good, and also they're very expensive to develop.
As the armoury of antibiotics capable of battling infections decreases, doctors are now being urged to prescribe them only when absolutely necessary. Emma Hayward, Al Jazeera.